I want to talk today about the absolute funkiness of the pre-Cars sound when Rick and Ben and Elliot were in Captain Swing. So Captain Swing and Magic Pants were floating down the street. I had a thing for rock singers my whole life. I mean, who hasn't, right? Way back when I was 7 years old in second grade, I fell under the spell of a boy who played the part of the Artful Dodger in the local high school production of Oliver. Imagine my delight when a few years later, that same talented fellow turned up in a band that played around town, middle school dances and CYO dances and graduation parties when I was in sixth grade. I was fortunate to become friends with him when we grew up, and he was still singing. My crushes in high school were almost always the guys who were in bands because they had that thing. I adored them from the front row when they played in the gazebo in the park or at the hub. Damn, the boys in the band, right? Well, I do believe that music is magic. And this brings me to today's topic, Captain Swing, an almost famous band. There exists an entire catalog of songs that Ben sang before the Cars were the Cars, and very few of them ever really made it onto official recordings, but you can find them on YouTube. Electric Angel Rock and Roller, if you look her up, she's got all of them listed. You can listen to them. They are fantastic. I wish I had a time machine. One of the things I would do would be to go back to the early bands shows, like the Rat, the Fog Hat record release party at a roller skating rink, that 1976 New Year's Eve show where they debuted as the Cars, the bye-bye party for Maxanne Sartori when she left WBCN, the show when they opened for Bob Seger. Oh, to have been able to have experienced the young and hungry band, the excitement about knowing they were on the cusp of a huge breakthrough. Ben and Rick sensing the struggle of the last 8 years was going to be worth it, before fame claimed their energy and their happiness and their bond. Before they were the Cars, Rick and Ben were ID Nirvana, Leatherwood, Milkwood, Ocasek and Orzechowski, then Ocasek and Orr, Richard and the Rabbits, Captain Swing, and then finally, after a series of showcases and lineup changes, the magic happened and the Cars emerged. Ben and Rick had been playing music together since about 1970 when they connected after Ben was discharged from the Army and found his way back into the Ohio music scene. They persevered through poverty and being dismissed at times as having nothing there. But once they formed Captain Swing, their distinctive sound really came together. In the time between that lineup and the really early Cars, they produced some terrific songs. They had a jazzy quality to them that was different from the Cars, a definite groove, a little more freeform, but you could definitely hear shades of the Cars. Of course, there were different band members. Danny Schliftman, or Danny Louie, later of Government Mule, was on keyboards. Glenn Evans was on drums, and Todd Roberta was on bass. Rick was still doing rhythm guitar, but Ben just sang. Rick wasn't quite satisfied with that sound. It wasn't quite what he wanted it to be yet, so he replaced Glenn with David Robinson, put Ben on bass, and connected again with earlier collaborator Greta Hawkes. As far as I've been able to discern, Ben sang, I think, most of the Captain Swing songs, not all of them, but most. Rick did sing an early version of Bye Bye Love, and it was definitely a good idea to eventually give that one to Ben. One of the reasons I love those songs is because you could really hear the evolution of Rick's writing and their sound. But another reason is that it just really showcased Ben's voice in a different way than Cars songs did. And as phenomenal as he sounded in the Cars, these songs have a real earthiness to them, like a more 70s groovy, funky sound. It's like he was able to let loose a little more than he did in the Cars. One of the songs, Jezebel, which I'm going to post below so you can hear it, both Rick and Ben sang, but Ben took the lead, and his voice is just so resonant. I've said this before, but he just had that capability to sing right into your soul. The syllables and the vowels he accentuated just, gave you the feels. He was so dreamy when he sang another one of their songs, Go On Sleeping, and he just had that way of just accentuating certain words or vowels or phrases. You were staying the night over 'cause you're such a lady, the way he sang lady. And then he drops his voice at the end, giving up on you. Go on sleeping, yeah. That yeah just makes you want to melt. Whenever Ben sang yeah, no matter what song it was, you could feel that electricity from the top of your head to your toes and everywhere in between. One of my all-time favorite songs is Wake Me Up. Ben's voice was low and deep and emotive and so sexy sounding. You know, he could really make Rick's lyrics come alive and fill them with a passion and a warmth that was just really special. You know, he says, I'd like to slow this spin I'm in, roll me up and drop me down. Yeah, back in New York town. I mean, obviously I can't do it justice here, so listen. Then there's a provocative seductiveness to the song Come Back Down, and it's got sort of like an early intro that sounds sort of like a early 50s-ish kind of rock and roll song, and then it definitely slides into Velvet Underground territory. You know, there was just a rawness that suited his voice. The early tracks were just, I don't know, sultry and a little dirty. Because Ben was born to perform, I think his voice was definitely a window to his soul. You know, I hear a joyousness in the early work, a real sense of fun, and I feel like it was such a contrast to the tone and feeling, no matter how good his voice was, and it still was, but of his unreleased, you know, solo work Postcards. There's a sadness to those songs. The early songs just really showcased, I also think, whatever it was that Benjamin Orr had that made him different, that made him special. You know, famous singers, of course, have that thing that sets them apart, that indefinable charisma. You know, and Ben Orr must have possessed a special kind of entrancing magic, a vibration, an aura, a magnetism that was just different from other people. If you read Joe Milliken's book, Let's Go, many of the people who knew him describe how Ben just had something that set him apart, even when he was very young. For someone who has been gone for over 24 years and had really been out of the spotlight for the last 10 years of his life, he still holds people in thrall. There are Pinterests and YouTube channels, Instagram accounts, blogs, and many Facebook groups devoted to beautiful Benjamin. And I find that so compelling. You know, of course, there are websites and tribute pages and social media, you know, related information to all kinds of rock stars, but there's something about Ben that just has this incredibly rabid, intense fan base all these years later. He really seemed to be two different people, too. The singer with that voice, you know, alluring stage presence, that rock star sexiness, who literally had and still has a hold on multitudes of women, yet he was so private and so mysterious. The quiet musician who did not seek the spotlight and who spoke very little about his personal life, you know, who lived not in New York or LA, but in a Boston suburb, you know, and then even further away from the music industry when he moved to Vermont. All bands have ups and downs, and all bands break up at some point, except for the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead. You know, and the only reason the Dead aren't all together anymore is because former members died. If they hadn't, you know, they'd still be trucking. So it's not really a shock that the Cars didn't make it longer than a decade. They officially broke up on February 1st, so yesterday, 1988. Sad how quickly things fell apart after the enormous success of Heartbeat City. I wish they had taken a break instead of completely disbanding. You know, I've said this before, but I firmly believe that if Magic Pants hadn't died so young, he'd still be doing what he had his whole life, having fun on stage with that sexy as hell grin, the blonde shag, and that unmistakable voice.